From the humble frigate to the mighty Titan, this is Sins of a Solar Empire 2. There are many kinds of ship in Sins of a Solar Empire 2, organised into one of 6 different classes. A ship's class is a very general indicator of its size, expense, and general level of threat it projects in a fleet engagement. Players are encouraged to direct research efforts to unlock the ships they need as they need them, but generally speaking, the larger and more advanced classes become available later in the game. It's important to note that a ship's class is no reliable indicator of its role in battle. While each of the 3 playable races in Sins 2 have their own unique ships in each class, each ship type within a class may be geared towards a very different combat role. Cruisers in particular are rather difficult to sort by role, and members of this class have a huge variety of jobs to fulfill in a fleet, where frigates and corvettes have somewhat less variation and have a more recognisable role in supporting your other ships in combat. However, the overall progression of the game's state is in part marked by the access each player has to each class of ship. The strategic threat represented by a faction increases dramatically when they begin to field the first cruisers, and once the Mighty Titan class enters the game, every empire will be alerted to this unmistakable danger. Strikecraft are the smallest class representing fighters and bombers operated by a single pilot, and are unique in that they are not built on a one-by-one basis. Instead, they are automatically constructed by carriers, usually cruisers, capital ships, titans and starbases, up to the maximum number of strikecraft that carrier can house. Strikecraft operate in swarms, and the more there are, the more deadly they become as their massed attacks quickly whittle down the shielding, armour and hull points of their targets. However, they are vulnerable to point defence, certain area of effect abilities like the TEC's flak burst and other fighters. Bombers are intended to deliver their payload to well-armoured targets, and field lower DPS weapons with a high pierce value that can negate higher durability on tougher ships like cruisers, capital ships and defensive orbital structures. Fighters are more lightly armed but fire rapidly. They are the most effective when targeting enemy bombers, other fighters and other very lightly armoured ships such as corvettes and certain frigates. The TEC in Advent will usually benefit from bringing a good mix of both fighters and bombers to a battle. Fighters to protect the bombers, and bombers to kill high-value targets. However, the Vasari consider the lives of their dwindling population to be too important to risk piloting vulnerable craft like fighters. Consequently, their strikecraft squadrons are formed entirely of bombers. Corvettes are the smallest and fastest non-strikecraft class, and have a unique capability to rapidly strafe around their targets as they fight. This enables them to outpace the slower tracking speeds of most weapon emplacements on enemy ships, and thus evade almost all incoming fire. They are most vulnerable to light weaponry, which usually boasts higher tracking speeds, and area of effect fire, which can rapidly eat through their small hulls. Most corvettes are designed to tie up and systematically destroy enemy frigates and other lightly armoured ships that do not field the light class of weapon that challenges them most effectively. This includes long-range missile frigates and cruisers, and other such vulnerable targets. Corvette roles vary less than other classes, but the Vasari have access to the Tesseract Raider that steals resources from orbital structures, while their Sulceract Defender doubles as an early game point defense solution. Meanwhile, the Advent's Acolyte Corvette generates antimatter as it damages enemy vessels, and can transfer it to its allies for their own purposes. Finally, every faction has a non-combat scout corvette available at the start of the game to explore the map, remaining useful throughout the game for probing enemy positions. Light frigates are an early game multi-purpose workhorse available to each faction, and these are joined by a few other useful, smaller ships to help round out the capabilities of your fleet. While their fixed firing arcs are countered by the rapid circling movement of corvettes, light frigates pack a bigger punch with a relatively high damage per second output for their size, outperforming their smaller corvette counterparts when matched against opponents fielding higher durability defensive systems. Other more advanced frigates bring point defense or bombardment weaponry, while others loose off swarms of long-range missiles to pick off larger targets at a distance. Regardless of their role, all frigates are relatively cheap, easy to field in larger numbers, and available relatively early on in a campaign. In large numbers, they can bog down bigger and more expensive ships, provide a useful meat shield to screen your more valuable cruisers and capital ships from damage, and their relatively high DPS values mean they cannot be ignored entirely. ensuring many frigates remain a useful option right through to the latter stages of the game. Cruisers are a larger class of support ships, with many different specifications and abilities represented to expand a fleet's capability as needed. Combat cruisers are significantly more powerful than the smaller classes, but tend to be more specialised in the targets they are best suited to defeat. Generally speaking, each faction fields a carrier for the transportation and deployment of Strikecraft, a long-range weapons system for tackling well-defended ships and structures from outside their own weapons range, and a dedicated vessel for defeating very heavily armoured starbases and titans. All factions have access to a well-armed and armoured heavy cruiser for frontline combat duty, while the Advent have more esoteric technology available that synergises well with their other fleet capabilities. Other cruisers repair damage, increase shield integrity, colonise or bombard planets, and reduce or shut down the capabilities of enemy ships, with each race fielding different options as befits their own unique playstyle. Capital ships are the centrepiece of your fleets in Sins of a Solar Empire 2. Big, deadly, highly customisable and expensive, each one you field brings tremendous capability to your Empire's power projection. The crews of your capital ships gain new abilities the longer they survive out in the field, with each kill made by your fleets increasing their experience and unlocking new and exciting abilities. Capital ships can also be upgraded with ship items, whether unlocked via research, acquired in auctions or traded for influence with the minor factions. These items allow very fine detailed customization of weaponry, defensive systems and many support abilities. There are 5 capital ship types for each of the 3 in-game races, although their performance and abilities differ quite dramatically across those factions. Firstly, there's a colonization specialist, which forgoes the extreme firepower of more combat-oriented ships in favour of extended colony building abilities, helping you supercharge your economy in the early game. There's also a frontline battleship, bristling with the most powerful weaponry and heavy armour, ready to face down the very worst threats to your empire. Battleships are geared towards one job: killing enemy ships as quickly and effectively as possible, and they excel in this role. The carrier capital ship brings many Strikecraft and supporting abilities to the front line of the war, reducing the need to bring more vulnerable carrier cruisers along with your fleets, and possessing the potential to dramatically increase the number of accompanying Strikecraft. Each faction also has access to some variation of a siege-oriented ship to rapidly bombard and capture enemy planets. Finally, each faction can build a support specialist, wielding faction thematic abilities to boost the performance of your own ships, or reduce the functionality or effectiveness of your enemies. The very largest and most dangerous class is the Mighty Titan. Armed with the most powerful weaponry and heavily defended with shielding, thick armour and dense hulls, once these juggernauts get going, they're incredibly difficult to stop. Titans are so powerful and difficult to supply that only one can be built at a time, requiring a significant research and development cost too. Just like capital ships and starbases, Titans have their own unique set of abilities, and access to their own Titan items, granting them extensive customization options. Building a Titan around super heavy defensive systems allows it to draw the attention of the enemy fleet's hardest hitting weapon systems away from your other ships, tanking massive damage with ease and staying in the fight long enough for them to win the battle. Alternatively, adding many advanced weaponry upgrades and Strikecraft hangars can turn your Titan into a combat monster, dedicated to quickly bringing down capital ships, starbases, and even other enemy Titans with ease. Titans don't have to be completely combat oriented either, with a wealth of fleet support and economic options available too. Each ship within each class is designed to fulfill a specific combat role and support the other ship types within your fleets. Learning to bring the right balance of ship classes in each fleet to counter what your enemy is fielding will be a crucial component of victory.